Hello and welcome to another episode of Trojan Dash. We got a special one for you today. After the rivalry week, USC comes out with a 43-38 win over UCLA yesterday at the Rose Bowl. I'm joined as always by Nathan Ackerman. Nathan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
Today we got a special guest, Scott Schrader of USC Scoop, recruiting expert. Scott, thanks for taking the time to be here.
Hey, no problem. Good to be here.
So we're going to get to recruiting in the back half of the show. We got some important things to talk about. We'll spend the first half of the show on the USC-UCLA game from yesterday. Then we'll get into the recruiting with early signing period starting on Wednesday. So we're looking forward to that. We'll get into recruiting for the second half of the show. I want to start with the highs and the lows from yesterday. Nathan, if you want to start, give me your highs and lows.
Yeah, sure. So, what a game. I'm still kind of exhausted. I can't believe. I feel like every week we say, this is not a sustainable way of winning football games. And then every week they just do it again. They're like, watch me. So, another exciting one. I guess that's a high in and of itself, but I don't want to steal too many of yours. So I'm going to say actually the run game. I was actually somewhat satisfied with last night. Of course, it didn't get going until late, but once it did, Vi was awesome. He was carrying a lot of the workload for the Trojan offense, and he was a large part of the reason why the passing game was also able to open up in the second half. So that was awesome to see. I think I want to see them, as we've talked about here. I want to see them run the ball earlier. They didn't really get into that soon enough, but once they did, I thought it opened up the entire offense. I thought short yardage plays on really both sides of the ball were awesome. That's something, especially on the offensive side, that USC really hasn't looked all too good in early on this year. There were some big 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 conversions that they were able to get. I think Stepp had a big carry on 3rd and 1 late in the game. I think it was his only carry of the game, but it was a huge one. And then Vi also got a few for third or fourth, I think mainly third and short in that game. Tyler Vaughn's.
Nathan, hold on one second. I want to get Scott in here, and I also want to mention real quick. Although our chat is not on screen, we can still see your messages. I see Emil's already here saying a win's a win, best game so far. So Emil, shout out to you as always. Scott, we talked a little bit in the pre-show about the running, and what really was a highlight of the game in the second half and really opened things up. You were at the game. I think, were you on field or were you in the box?
The press box.
Press box. What was your view from there in terms of the running game?
It was a game to where every week you're waiting for one running back to kind of break out from the pack and kind of carry the load. And what I was seeing that the running game was there last night, and more often than they have in weeks past, they really started taking advantage of it. But it took a little bit longer than I think we thought it might. Versus considering the defense that UCLA was playing, but I just think Vi really looks solid. He's one of the guys that really stands out as a future NFL running back to me at USC, and I just thought that he ran really well, really hard, and I thought the offensive line overall did a really exceptional job too.
Yeah, one of the things I used to say about Vi, especially last year when we saw that three-headed monster for the first time, was Vi was that short yardage guy where it was get him on 3rd and 1, 2nd and 2, whatever, short yardage situations, goal line situations. And it really looked like yesterday he kind of moved away from that a little bit more than we've been seeing, where he's still getting those, but he's getting those bigger runs. He's a little bit more elusive than we've seen before. And it really looks like a good game for him. So I was glad to see that. I'm going to give you my high now. And I'm going to go again with being able to win and switch up the game plan late. I think that's the best thing. And I want to see it earlier, so I'm gonna segue into my low with that, because this is a high and a low. They were able to adapt, but that's my issue with this team right now. Is it seems like it happens so late. It's not too late because they're able to pull out wins like you saw against Arizona State, Arizona, and just yesterday against UCLA. But you see this heavy zone coverage, this heavy drop 8, where USC just tries to throw into it for an entire half and not switch the game plan. And then when they get down to it in the second half, they're like, now we need to start running the ball. When you start running the ball, you start seeing more man coverages. Scott, what's your take on Graham Harrell's offense? I know we love to talk air raid, but in the reality of it, it really moves away from an air raid and they start doing well. I mean, is it time to move away from we're going to throw the ball?
Well, it's what's interesting about Graham Harrell is Graham Harrell came to USC, and in North Texas, it was about a 50-50 offense, run pass. But at North Texas, he didn't have 4, 5, 6, 7 future NFL wide receivers either. So you're looking at and a quarterback that is talented as Keaton Slovis. So I think you're looking at the byproduct of kind of like, well, I've got all this, but at the same time, it just seems like it was going so pass heavy in situations to where the run was available for them to use, and like you said, they just seemed like it was continually forcing the pass. And so I know that's frustrating for fans to watch, and it's sometimes perplexing to all of us that are watching. But you look at that second half, and you're wondering, why is USC playing one half of good football, and oftentimes having to come back in the fourth quarter against teams that are clearly better than to pull out a really close victory. So, overall, I think it's hard to win football games this year. There's not many teams that were undefeated after 5 games. So I think overall the offensive scheme to me sometimes is kind of like, what are you doing? But at the same time, you're looking at 5 wideouts they could put out there and go 7-on-7 against teams, and it would be very difficult and challenging for those teams to stop them.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it where the teams, when USC forces a team to go into that man coverage is when they start, really lighting up teams. That's what we saw against, Washington State, where they were trying to play man on them, and it doesn't work against those wide receivers in that heavy throwing offense. Nathan, what's your low? I have a feeling I think I know what it is.
Okay, kind of a completely different point here, but I thought Clay Helton's decision making at some points in those in that game was questionable to say the least. The one call that really stuck out to me that I very much did not like was going for 2 with, I think there were 4 minutes left in the third quarter. It was 28-23, and they tried to go for 2 to make that a 3-point game. Now the play itself actually worked. Keaton missed Vi, was pretty much wide open in the flat there, and he had a pretty open lane to the end zone there. But I thought the idea itself to try to go for 2 there, it was just way too early. In my opinion, I thought maybe if there were 10, 11 minutes left in the game, that would have been a okay call. But like at that point, more points were going to be scored, and you didn't know whether they were going to be field goals, touchdowns, whatever. At that point, I think you just got to take the point there. And it came back to bite them later, because when they scored the go-ahead touchdown, the first one to make it 36-35, they had to go for 2 again there to make it a 3-point game. They didn't get that one either. And then instead of that being a 3-point game, it would have been 38-35, and the field goal would have just tied it there. Then the field goal took the lead, and they ended up coming back. But I thought still they put themselves into that place that they really shouldn't have, and it ended up not hurting them too much, but it was just one of those things you look back on. If they aren't able to score in those last 52 seconds, I think it was, you look back on that and say, this could have gone to OT. We didn't have to lose this game now. Some of the timeouts too, he called two timeouts, I think one like in the middle of the fourth and one in somewhat early in the third quarter. That didn't really feel like necessary timeouts to me. I mean, I don't know exactly what he saw. Maybe he saw something that I didn't see. But that was also something again
defense I think was fine, just to slow UCLA down a bit.
Yeah, sure. But we almost got to the point where if UCLA was able to convert on that 3rd and short late with like a minute left, they would have been able to just run down the clock and the game would have been over. So it felt like assuming they make the kick, which they probably would have. I thought some of those timeouts were not really necessary. I would have liked to see them save those because at that point they were still trailing. They knew that they were going to need some sort of comeback, and I would have liked to see them save those for the last couple minutes. In the end, it didn't really hurt them because in the end USC's playmakers made plays. That's what playmakers do, and it saved them. But I thought again with the 2-point conversions, and then again when it was 43-38, I don't know why they weren't going for 2 there. Or no, 42-38. I don't know why they weren't going for 2 there to at least, if UCLA had scored the touchdown, at least make them make the extra point to give them the lead there. I guess you didn't want, a 2-point attempt getting picked off or fumbled and like returned for 2 more points. But I don't know. Were you really counting on that, like 100-yard? So I don't know. Those were just some things.
Team, do you ever know, Nathan?
Kind of stuck out.
I'm like,
no, you don't.
I'm thinking, yeah, you kind of expect that stuff, actually.
But I mean, from Keaton.
Out.
Okay, fair, but I don't know if like 100-yard, fumble, interception recovery for 2 points points on that play, something you really necessarily need to be like, okay, we're going to sacrifice making this a 6-point game. So I don't know, that one didn't get me quite as much as the others, but again, the thing that really irked me the most was going for 2 with 4 minutes left in the third quarter. It was just way too early for me.
Yeah, we got to move on to our next segment. I want to address the chat first. We got Emil Jones and Scott Rodriguez, as always, in the chat, talking about how our inside run game needs work, running a little bit more RPO, maybe getting that done. And Scott was talking about how the defense, the timeouts on defense were to slow UCLA down a little bit, and that was absolutely something that was necessary in my take. Finding ways to slow down Chip Kelly's offense because USC did not look ready for it. I don't know how you don't prepare better for that.
Yeah,
maybe they did. I don't know.
But again, but I mean, again,
we got to move on, Nathan. I'm cutting you off. I'm sorry.
All right.
God, I'm gonna let you have the first word on this next one. We got 2 games left for USC. We got a bowl game, hopefully a Fiesta Bowl, New Year's Six Bowl, maybe against Indiana, and we have the Pac-12 championship against Washington or Oregon or Colorado or whatever happens with COVID. Who knows?
Doesn't have COVID.
Whoever's eligible to play that week, I guess. So, Scott, what is the most important thing that you think this team needs to fix going forward?
Yeah, honestly, this is a good conversation or a topic that I have with quite a few people because, I get a lot of texts and phone calls and conversations wanting to talk about the offense and the scheme and the this and the that and whatever might be going on offensively, defensively. And I'm kind of like, this all boils down to discipline. And if USC is disciplined, like Stanford is disciplined, they have no problem last night. You're talking about they get penalties at times where they'll come up with these huge defensive plays or huge offensive plays at times, and they'll get called back. And it's not like they're even getting called back sometimes by plays that are happening during the play. It's the personal foul stuff that kills USC. So I think that kind of stuff, and maybe if there were some issues with timeout, I just think for USC, I think they're well coached. I do think USC is prepared. And obviously they have a lot of energy and the fight in this team is tremendous. But I think what it boils down to is USC just needs to play disciplined. They show they can execute, so that's really not an issue. They've showed that they can do pretty much everything, offensively and defensively. I just think tackling and discipline are the 2 key items for me.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with kind of ruining stops after the play. There was a certain defensive back yesterday that got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, and although I thought it was kind of a little bit soft of a call after I watched it back, I thought he threw him to the ground a little bit more. He really didn't. He just really kind of stepped over him, and yeah, while it is kind of a soft call, you need to take yourself out of those situations, and that's really not out of the ordinary for him. And stuff like that just really needs to stop because they had a good stop on them there, and they were going to bring up a tough 3rd down situation. You get the ball back. If you make one more stop from 3rd and long. I do want to say, everyone in chat, I know we have a lot of people watching right now. What do you think needs to happen going forward? What needs to be fixed? Drop it in the chat. We'll read your answers if we like them. Nathan, what do you think needs to happen going forward?
Yeah, I think tackling pretty much sums up 90% of what was on my mind because they were in situations, they were in places to make plays in that game. They just didn't, especially in the first half. It got a lot better in the second half, but I think they just need to be more prepared coming out of the gate. And I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? You don't want to go down 14-0 in that game. But it seemed like on the defensive side, they were not ready for the tempo whatsoever. I don't know who that really falls on, maybe Orlando, Elton, whoever, but they need to be coming out of the gate there. I think it was the second touchdown. It might've been the first on that screen. Was it to Felton where USC's offense or defense was just not set at all. And, the Bruins took advantage of that, and they ran a play really quickly, and it was pretty much over from there. It was like a 30-yard touchdown or something like that. And then on the offensive side, we've already talked about this.
Hey Nathan, I'm losing you a little bit.
The running game going
in here. I want you to try and fix your Wi-Fi right now. But I'm going to jump in and talk about what I think needs to happen going forward while we wait for Nathan to get back. I mean, I said it earlier, and it is run the ball out of the gate. Give yourself those options early on and get ahead. That's just the one thing that I really want to see different with this team. I'm not sold on the heavy air raid and preventing that. I think missed tackles were iffy yesterday. I personally, and Scott, I want to get your thoughts on this. Olano Hufunga, I love him as a player. I love him at safety. I liked him at linebacker a lot against Washington.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on
But,
that?
that could ultimately, he's a guy that can get bigger and obviously end up playing that position in the NFL without any problem at all. And yeah, I think, and watching him this year, and watching him in when he came to USC, he could have. We were all thinking he could have been a running back, he could have been a linebacker, and could have been a safety. And I think he could be really, really good as a linebacker. Absolutely outstanding as a linebacker. But I really love. I think what I think should be encouraging to USC fans is how much better his cover skills and his DB play is this year. And I think a lot of that credit needs to go to Craig Nyber. I think Craig Nyber and Dante have really been huge additions to this coaching staff. And I think the DB play overall has been to me quite solid.
Yeah, it definitely looks a lot better. There are times where we see the defense get burned, but I think those are less than we've seen before, especially last year. The defense feels a lot more solid, but when it does break down, it breaks down bad. So I wish we could kind of find a middle ground between having really consistent play and not breaking down terribly. I would like to break down a little bit less than that, but baby steps, I think. We got some guys in the chat again. Emil says, stop the silly missed tackles, play more tempo, particularly at the 2 minutes point. Scott's going play more disciplined football, more physical O-line play. Need to be consistent on third down. I agree with all that. I think the O-line is, when the O-line does well and Keaton's able to sit there, and granted, Keaton's able to get away when he needs to, but when he has a little bit more time there, that's when he looks good. You saw that pocket break down a couple times, and that's when he got sacked and they got put into that 3rd and 27, then had to kick a field goal to get 3 points on that big turnover too. That was a drive I was really hoping they were gonna capitalize on, but they didn't. We're gonna move on to our last segment.
I want to give a quick update. I just got word that
go for it.
Vavai is going to be fine.
Perfect.
I guess
love to hear that.
I didn't know he was injured until this morning. So
yeah, he went out and they put in Step for a little bit.
Yeah, he had a knee issue and he's fine. They're just precautionary stuff going on right now. So anyway, he should be fine.
Awesome. Well, the other thing is Greg Johnson being out. I was interested to see how they kind of filled in for his role. I think it looked fine. Definitely miss Greg out there. I think he has a lot of potential. I think next year could be a solid year for him. But I want to move into recruiting. That's why we're here. That's why Scott's here. Is the season time for everyone to talk about USC recruiting? And it looks better than it did last recruiting class. USC is ranked number 2 in the Pac-12 for the class of 2021 so far, and number 14 in the nation. And that's despite losing Jake Garcia a little bit earlier. Scott, I know you don't buy super far into the stars a lot of the time. So what is your rating of this class? Let's say out of 5 stars, what do you give this class right now?
Well, I've always kind of looked at things position wise and needs wise and whatnot. I think that if you look at it from a needs and the quality of guys that you're going to be putting in, filling those needs, next year and beyond, I think they're doing a tremendous job. I think the defensive back is going to be to me, in the 19 years or so that I've been covering USC recruiting, I would say this is going to be the best defensive back class they've had ever. And I think you'll see it on the field in the future. Offensive line class, it's probably not as strong as they wanted it to be from a ranking perspective. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with one of them with Kingsley from Utah. If Mario ends up going to Auburn, where the USC can get back into that one and flip him to USC before signing day. But his family had planned to move to Eugene, Oregon, so there's that's a complicated situation. But running backs, I think they needed a couple. You got running backs that are going to be coming back. I don't know if they're all coming back, but before the season started, USC thought that all the running backs would be coming back. But whether a transfer happens or somebody leaves for another reason, that could possibly happen. But Brandon Campbell is committed; he's signing on Wednesday, and then you have Alton McCaskill from Houston, Texas, who's going to be, I think, the second running back in this class. So they'll be doing well there. There's some area. I think a lot of the guys that are going to be making kind of program changing guys are going to be announcing their commitment in January 2nd and signing. Some of them are going to be signing in February. So overall, I think this is an exceptional class. It should end up somewhere around 6 or something like that, 6 or 7, probably.
nationally.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
Well, I don't know.
there's a quarterback. You mentioned Jake Garcia. I don't know how much we're going to be talking recruiting specifically about guys, individuals, but Jackson Dart is a quarterback from Corner Canyon High School in Draper, Utah, and I think he's going to end up signing with USC. And he was a guy that was a 3-star, hardly had any offers at all, and then coaches started getting his film. After 6 games, after 7 games, and they kept getting it. I personally think he's one of the USC getting him and Miller Moss are getting 2 of the top 10 quarterbacks, easily top 10 quarterbacks in the country. I think Jackson Dart, you could make an argument that he might be as good as any of them.
Well, I've been here for 4 years at USC, Scott, and I know what a 3-star quarterback can do in Sam Darnold and Keaton Slovis. So, hey, man, I love a good 3-star. But I don't know if you know this. There's a man out of Centennial High School by the name of Corey Foreman, who will be committing on January 2nd. He's narrowed his list down to 5 schools.
Yeah.
Is USC? What are your odds for USC picking him up?
At this point, we're 3 days away from signing day. I think he's signing on the 16th. That's at least what he told me, and then he's going to announce on the All-America Bowl, Jubilee or whatever they want to call it, showcase. There's going to be a bunch of big announcements that day. Shia Wright, I think, is one of them. But I at this point, I really think that USC is a strong favorite right now.
And when you say strong favorite, what are you saying? Like, what percentage?
I would be surprised if he doesn't end up at USC.
Really? Well, I know that's going to be huge, replacing Drake Jackson. I think that's a solid pick.
Yeah, there's some variables that are involved with Corey. And he's not the only one. A lot of kids in Southern California, they don't want to leave. They don't want to go out of state, but they were looking at USC and thinking, that was just not the best place for me to be. So a lot of these kids have just been waiting for USC to show them something. So now you're talking about a lot of top elite defensive players that they're trying to sign here late in the process. And they're seeing the changes on the defensive side of the ball. How many points were scored last night and how many points have been scored in these games. There's absolutely no question that this defense looks like something really good could be happening with it. Okay, they played 5 games. They had no spring ball with a new defensive coordinator, and it's been a crazy year. They've had some injuries at linebacker. They've had a lot of stuff going on that a lot of other teams do too. But USC is 5-0. The defense looks like they came up in the second half against UCLA and really played well. So, I think that's what it comes down to with a lot of guys right now that USC is going after, is that they were looking for reasons to stay home, and USC has given them those reasons.
Well, I think you led me into my next point, and Emil actually brought it up in the chat too. But I think also having Dante Williams not picking out players from our backyard now and taking them up north definitely helps. Having him here and kind of knocking Oregon down a rung on the ladder. But I've been talking about this with Nathan, and my realistic ceiling for this team this year at this point is 7 or 8, national rank. You win the Pac-12 championship, you win your bowl game. I think they can hit somewhere around 7 or 8. And I think that does a lot for recruiting. Scott, I know you talk with these guys on a regular basis, and what you're at, liberty to say, I don't know. But I mean, what is the general feel around USC right now from a recruit's perspective? Someone that maybe is already there. I know Miller Moss is kind of vocal about, about USC right now. What are they feeling?
The feedback that I've gotten, again, you have 2 sides of the ball, right? So you're looking at the guys. The offensive players had already seen what USC did last year, and they're seeing what they can do this year. And so the feedback that I'm getting is there's a lot of excitement, and part of that excitement is the amount of energy that this coaching staff conveys to these recruits, and the amount of time that they spend recruiting them. This is the first year in many, many, many years there's been no drop off from any coach during the recruiting process. They've been consistent and solid with their communication from start to finish, and as good as anybody at it. So the excitement level it was generated early on with the staff, and they got a lot of early commitments. And then there were a lot of guys that were saying, okay, the talk is great. We're excited. We like you. You're a coaching staff that we could see ourselves playing for, but we want to see the results on the football field. And I think they've seen enough. They're not going to see much more. And the excitement level is pretty high, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the Oregon game last year, November 2nd of 2019. I remember being in that press box, and Nathan, Nathan will remember this. Nathan was very hopeful. We were down by 21 points with about 10 minutes left. He's like, we can still win this game. I'm like, no, we can't. And then I go down to the field after the game, which, by the way, we lost by a lot of points, Nathan. So just wanted to bring that up for you.
I know. I remember.
And I remember seeing recruits just walking up the tunnel. I'm like, that is not a good look for USC. I mean, if I'm to a school and I go to a big game like that, whether it's an Oregon or a UCLA for USC, I see them get pummeled like that. I mean, that was a beating. USC was not in that game at all.
At the Oregon locker room to look in.
Yeah,
it was not a good look at all.
That was a rough one for me. But I think this recruiting class looks better from an optics standpoint, and this is my take on it from last year. I know a lot of people were angry with the recruiting rankings and whatever it is that 24/7 Sports puts out or ESPN or whoever it is puts out. But like you said, they were recruiting for what they needed. They needed big guys on the line. They didn't need receivers. They didn't really need running backs or a quarterback. And in that class, I mean, what do you buy into in terms of, was last year bad and is this year better just from an optics standpoint in terms of what they got?
Yeah, optics wise, right. It was the optics were not good at all. But I think what it amounted to is that you had some guys that were program changing type guys like S. Ricks and Justin Flo and so on. And those guys, just as much as they wanted to go to USC, there was just no way that they could pull the trigger on it, and for different reasons too. But overall, I think that you're looking at. And it's such a big difference this year in trying to go after guys like that. And it just comes down to USC had a bunch of coaches last year that just were not, I don't know. It was hard to believe on how little effort they put into recruiting. It's going to be a big difference going forward. Sorry, I was just distracted by an alert.
All good. Yeah. I mean, like you said, I love the change in coaching, just from a standpoint of what the team looks like on the field. I love the energy. I've said it 100 times. I love Todd Orlando. That introductory press conference we went to way back when he first got there, we sat down in that classroom, and Todd Orlando just goes on like, "We're gonna hit in practice. We're gonna put these guys through the gauntlet." And I'm like, I like this guy. Seems like an absolute hard ass, which I like for this team. But what I wanted to say about the recruiting class.
Let me add one more thing too. I was going to add one more thing, but going back to last year's class. That offensive line class that USC signed last year, I don't know what they were all ranked. That offensive line class is going to be a future top offensive line in the Pac-12, based off the guys that they brought in from their last class, and maybe adding one from this year. So they were underrated.
When I was preparing for our show that we did at Annenberg Media last year about National Signing Day, I was looking up the heights and weights of all these guys, and I put them all in a row together. And if you look at the linemen, it looks like they got every dude that was over 6'6" and 300 pounds in the Southern California area. I'm like, this class is huge. I mean, Kobe Pepe, oh my God. I met him for a story we did when Kobe Bryant passed, and I remember just looking up at this dude. I'm like, dude, this guy's 4 years younger than me. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Those guys are huge. I'm excited for that, and I don't know what they do to rank linemen in terms of stars or whatever it is, but I think it was a fine class last year. I think it's good going forward. Scott, we're running out of time here, but I want to leave you with any closing thoughts you have about this recruiting class going forward, or USC finishing off the season. I'll let you have the floor.
Well, USC, the better USC finishes the football season, the better the recruiting class could finish. Because there's a couple of guys that are looking between USC and Ohio State, and a couple that are still looking USC and some back east and so on. But I think what you're going to find is that as disappointing as signing day was the last couple of years, it's going to be that exciting for USC fans this signing day. Could be some surprises. There could be, even for me, there might be a surprise. Like, there was a surprise. I had no idea that the transfer from Alabama was happening. So I think it's a little bit more challenge to keep it a secret from me on recruiting end, from high school kids. But I think it's going to be a very, very exciting signing days, December and February.
Well, we look forward to it. We'll have those things all hit. Scott, I want to thank you again for taking the time to be here with us today.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Good seeing you.
All right, so this has been another episode of Trojan Dash. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. As always, you can find us on the web at www.dashsports.tv. You can find us on social. Follow us at Dash Sports TV on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. You name it, we're there. Thank you for watching another episode. As always, you can find our columns exclusively published with Sports Pac-12 online at www.sportspac12.com or follow them on Twitter at SportsPac12. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being active in the chat. Scott, Nathan, thanks for joining me. It's championship week, baby. See you then.
It's championship week.